Okay, so thank you for coming along. As I said, we just felt it would be useful to update people. I know everybody in this call is kind of coming from a different place. Some people are relatively new volunteers, others are some of our longer standing. So hopefully it's a useful update for everybody, but it might be the most kind of significant change, I guess, will be for the people who've been with us for quite a while, and it's a bit of a change to our processes and how we work with our clients. So I'll just share this presentation with you. So I'm anticipating probably around 20 minutes, half an hour or so to go through this. So I'll take you through that to start with, and then hopefully we've got some time at the end if anybody wants to ask any questions. So this is all in line with some funding that we've received recently from a project called Squire, which I think is an abbreviation for Stroke Quality Improvement in Rehabilitation. So it's an NHS funding organisation or a splinter group from the NHS who've been able to give us some funds, and that's why we've had to make some changes to what we're offering to people. So I'll just go through right from the basics, I suppose, to start with. So for people who have probably had this information given at volunteer induction, but just to refresh. So as you know, we're based in Wakefield, and we've been established since 2011. We have had lottery funding since 2017, and that's allowed us to develop our services across the Yorkshire region, which has continued since 2020. So the majority of our referrals come from NHS speech and language therapists, sometimes from private sector speech therapists, but also we get self-referrals and referrals from other charities. For example, Stroke Association is one of our bigger referrers. We offer one-to-one support, as you well know, in the home and over Zoom, and then group support through our Aphasia cafes and app clubs. So the app club, just to touch on that a little bit, it might be broken down in one of the other slides, but I'll go through that now. So we had a bit of a pilot project for a couple of blocks of the app club, which were basically to replicate what volunteers would provide to people in their own homes, but we were doing it in a community venue. So we did the first block in Dewsbury and then the second block from our office in Wakefield, and we offered support to up to 4 people with aphasia, and it was a student placement for people on speech and language therapy courses, this time around from Leeds Beckett University. So it just gave us an option to match some people up who were in areas where we didn't really have the volunteer numbers that we would need to offer that regular support, and also to meet each other and meet other people who are in the same position. So we were still working on the apps, just in one place, which meant we could spread ourselves across a few more people at the same time. So we've had 120 referrals last year, so we're quite busy and lots of people waiting for our support. And as you'll know from the relaunch that we had, we're now known as Aphasia Support. So we moved away from the previous label of Speak with IT, just to encapsulate better everything that we offer. It was very much focused on the apps and the technology, which is definitely one of our big selling points, but it's certainly not the only thing that we offer. And then, as I mentioned, we had that funding received, which was quite a substantial amount, to allow us to develop our services a bit further and try and even up the support that we're offering to people. And then to remind everybody of our mission statement, what we aim to do with the people that we're supporting. So we want everybody to have equal access to support and to reduce isolation for people with aphasia, to improve communication skills and well-being of people with aphasia, to raise awareness and understanding of aphasia, to improve knowledge, skills and confidence of carers and volunteers to provide support for people with aphasia, and to try and supplement what the NHS is offering. So we are very much fitting into that longer term support option for people with aphasia, where a lot of the NHS services will have time limits potentially, or can only offer so many sessions before they're unable to continue, just in view of their demand, really. So what are the aims of this project that we are looking at integrating into Aphasia Support? It's a transition of people potentially away from NHS services. So what we find is that a lot of our referrals come from NHS services where people have had a period of support and they've reached that limit as to what that service can offer, or they've reached a point in time where they're maybe plateauing or not seeing that progress quite the same. And that's often when they might refer to us with some aims to continue that longer term support, both for those language outcomes, trying to make somebody's aphasia better and improve that difficulty that they have, but also looking at psychological support and the well-being aspect. So the aim for us is that we want to reduce how long people are waiting. And because of the variability in the volunteer base and the areas that we have more volunteers versus the areas where we have fewer, at the moment that's not very equitable. So sometimes people are able to be much quicker in some areas than in others. The hope is that we can reduce the wait across the board to 1 month. This funding, just to say, it does mention South and West Yorkshire. I know some of you will be North Yorkshire based, so the funding doesn't actually cover the North Yorkshire area, but we are trying to have a blanket approach, so we'll still be following the same kind of approach in North Yorkshire as what we are everywhere else. So as it says there, we're close to 6 months of a waiting time for some of our areas, which obviously is much less than much more than what we'd want it to be. And we're hoping that we can support 200 people with aphasia with these funds. So over the next 12 months or so, that's our quite ambitious target. So we're measuring to look at how well people feel that their well-being's improved. And the way that we do that is we'd look at an outcome measure questionnaire, which we complete at the start when we match somebody up, and then at the end of their period of support to see if we can measure any change. And our volunteer recruitment will continue, but the volunteer recruitment is going to be focused in more specific areas. So as you'll see as we go along, the new staff members that we have in place to help with these matching appointments are going to be working in quite particular areas where we've not had as many volunteers to support us. So our volunteer recruitment will still be a big part of what we do, but it's going to be more focused into certain geographical areas. So that leads us on to introducing our new speech and language therapy assistants. So we have Steve and Karen, and between them they will be covering Bradford, Calderdale and Wakefield. And then Karen is based more in South Yorkshire, so we'll cover Rotherham, Doncaster and Barnsley. So there were 6 areas where we found it really challenging to secure and keep volunteers. So we know that those 2 members of staff now will be there and present to be able to support people living in those areas for a good period of time, which is really, really promising. And this is how they fit into our structure. So just to, if that's of interest to you, just to break down as to how the charity is arranged. So we have the trustees who oversee everything. We have James, who's the CEO, and then we have myself and Emily, who you might have met. We have Ashlyn, and then we have admin support and Lynn, who's our charity fundraiser, and then Karen and Steve sitting under the SLT assistant umbrella, and of course you as volunteers. So what support do we currently offer? So again, a refresher, if you've been matched with people before, you'll be very familiar with this. But up to present, we've been offering one-to-one volunteer support in the home or over Zoom, dependent on potentially geography having an impact there. If we've got a lack of people in particular areas, we've tried to manage that by offering some support via video. Or it might have been somebody's preference, and I certainly know some people were matched up with clients during the pandemic where it wasn't possible to go out and see them in their own homes. So people have been loaned iPads for 3 to 6 months, but we found that the loans often go beyond the 6 months because there's a little bit of back and forth of needing to discuss things like app grants and whether or not somebody needs our support with those things. So we can apply to some funds to help people pay for iPads and therapy apps once that loan period has ended. But we're finding that there's quite a long wait for some of those grant applications to be processed, sometimes up to 6 months. We've been reviewing one-to-one support at 6 and 12 months. So either myself and Emily have been conducting a review there. So it might just be a brief chat with the volunteer and then a call to the client to see how things are. And it has potentially been a visit on some occasions if there's been something quite complex to address. And then we've been offering a maximum of support for 12 months at each of the stages of our pathway. So we'll look at the pathway and how it has changed shortly. And then stage 2, potentially for another 12 months. So that has equated to, in a lot of cases, 2 years plus of support. We try to transition people into the Aphasia cafes if they've got one that they can access, or we can link them into one of our Zoom Aphasia cafe meetings. But it's not been possible to do that across the board. There are still some people who struggle to access those, so they might have continued their one-to-one support in lieu of that. As I've mentioned there, the Aphasia cafes, we've got Leeds, Wakefield, Barnsley, Halifax, or Calderdale, as I believe it's known. Its official title on the website anyway. And then Doncaster is our newest group, which started, I think, in April. And then we also offered some carer support. So we had a pilot scheme of some online sessions for people who were caring for somebody who has aphasia. And these are the changes that we're looking at bringing in. So because we're keen to make the support equitable across the board and make sure that we're available to keep up with that target of trying to match people as soon as we can, we're looking at offering 3 months of support. So what that looks like is 12 sessions, one session per week. And that's either from a staff member, so either Karen or Steve, or yourselves as volunteers. And it might be in the home or over Zoom, dependent on what the need is. Following that, what we agreed was that we would reduce the frequency of the sessions to monthly. And we might also provide support via the app clubs. So the app clubs will continue as part of a student placement offering. And we may also ask if any volunteers were interested in being part of that as well to help us. So we are still working with our clients one-to-one within those group sessions. So sometimes it's really helpful to have some extra people to make sure that we've got that free time to donate to everybody who comes to the groups. So it might be that we are asking volunteers to help with those app clubs in future too. So the aim is to match people up for support within a month of the referral coming through. So that's once somebody has been referred to us, we've made contact with them, they've filled in their paperwork that we need them to fill in, then we would aim to match them up within 4 weeks. We'd then be looking at loaning the iPad for up to 4 months. At that point, regardless of whether or not somebody is needing help with grant applications, they will need to return the iPads back to us. We will continue to support them with the grants to help pay for iPads or apps, but we'll have to be talking about that quite a bit sooner. So potentially from session 6 of the 12 weekly sessions. There will be a review. Similarly to the 6-month review previously, we'll review after the 15 sessions. And then that will be one of our speech therapists, so either myself or Emily will be doing those reviews. And then we'll look to signpost to one of the Aphasia cafes, which will be our ongoing long-term option. So although we're putting a limit into place for the one-to-one side, we are still having that option of the Aphasia cafe as having no endpoint. So somebody can go along to those meetings and they can stay for as long as they feel it's useful to them. If we have capacity, and this is potentially where the volunteer role might be slightly different in terms of this offering, I'll come on to that a little bit more. But if we have capacity, then we'll try, if we can, to offer a little bit more one-to-one support if it's appropriate for that person, for that individual with aphasia. So we're now looking at a very maximum of 12 months of one-to-one support. So we continue to run those cafes, they become our long-term support option. And we keep looking for funds for new groups, whether that's online or if we can open in an area where there isn't some group support available to people. Anybody can join our Zoom aphasia groups. So they are Leeds and Wakefield have Zoom meetings. So every other meeting for each of those is on Zoom. But we do have people from other areas joining those. So it doesn't matter where somebody lives. If they can access Zoom, then they can access that support. So we're promoting that quite a lot now for people who are in areas where they might not have a local group they can get to, or if they can't get out of the house particularly easily, we're encouraging and practicing with them getting onto Zoom to be able to use those, to access those cafes that are being run online. We're reviewing the carer support option just to figure out what's the best approach for that going forwards. But in the meantime, carers can go along to the Aphasia Cafe meetings. So there's quite a lot of carers who do attend and find it really useful for that peer support. And obviously we give some support, and that informal support is there for people when they're having the one-to-one sessions with clients. So this is what our new pathway looks like. So whereas we were talking previously about stage 1 being for around 12 months, and the same for stage 2, a further 12 months, we're now looking at a 6-month up to a 6-month period. So stage 1 is very much around working on those therapy apps and trying to improve language skills. As I mentioned, that can be at home, or it might be over Zoom or in an app club, so community setting. We'll review that after 6 months. And then at that point, we have to make a decision as speech therapists whether we want somebody to move on to the aphasia cafes, so stage 3, or whether we're in a position to continue that support and move in line with stage 2. So that might still be using the therapy apps, but it's more of a focus on well-being, quality of life, and integrating independence, I suppose, working towards people being independent with their language skills and their communication in day-to-day life. So yeah, with or without the iPad, it might depend on the client's preference. It might depend on how much progress we've seen as to whether we justify carrying on with those apps, or whether actually it might not be the right thing for that person. And then we have a review again after 6 months, and at that point that would signal the end of the one-to-one support, and they would transition into one of the aphasia cafes, or again we've practiced looking at those online meetings if we can. And then the long-term support option, or potentially to signpost to other options. So if we've got the aphasia cafes in key areas, we've got the online meetings. Failing that, if somebody is struggling to access the online and they don't have a local meeting, we're trying our best to find out what else is out there for people. And if there's something in their area that would be of use to them, of benefit, then we're referring them on if we need to do, or we're just signposting them as to how they can get involved and find out more information about those things. So that's the new pathway. And then what we thought was we'd just justify some of the reasoning around why we have made those changes. So hopefully it's clear from some of the information that I've gone through there, that we've had an increase in referrals, and that our volunteer numbers haven't been sufficient to really support that increase in referrals. And some of our areas where we previously might have had quite a good volunteer base, we've been finding it more challenging to recruit to those areas. So that's meant that people have been waiting quite a long time for support. In addition, of course, the funds that we've got now are coming from the NHS. So that means that we have to make sure that we're offering a reliable service, that what we're providing is the right thing, and it's equitable across the region, and that we're able to justify that what we're doing is working for people, is having a positive impact. And then we have, of course, our two new staff members who are going to be very busy. As you can appreciate, they're working across 6 particularly busy areas, with lots of people being waiting quite a long time for support, and lots of iPads being loaned out. So that, of course, is one of our biggest expenses, is around the iPads, and how we can keep turning those over to the people that need them. Being that it is a core part of our work, we need to try and make sure that people are returning those iPads in good time, and it means that we're not able to sustain those long-term iPad loans beyond the 6-month period. And up to present, we have no specific funding in place for the carer support, so that's why that formal arrangement isn't there at the moment, but we are considering the future and what that will look like, because it's a really important part of what we're offering and how we support people. So what does this mean for you as volunteers? For some of you, this will mean no difference in the sense of you might be waiting for your first match, in which case this is all new anyway. If you're an existing volunteer, it might feel like quite a change. Some of you will already be working with people who have potentially gone beyond that 6-month timescale. So what we have said in that case, if we have people who are already matched, that we would have previously undertaken a 12-month review of each of those clients to review their needs and agree the next steps. So when our clients are coming up to that 12-month review, so those existing people who've been a long-term match for somebody, at that point we will discuss the changes with them as an individual, and we will start to gradually step back that support. So you are theoretically being asked to provide support in line with what Karen and Steve as our staff members are providing. However, if you are able to continue weekly sessions for 6 months rather than reducing to monthly, then that obviously is beneficial to the client that you're working with. As you can appreciate, we're having to put that in place really for managing those staff members' time. But if you as volunteer have that time to offer, then ideally continuing for 6 months is brilliant. After the 6 months, we do the review that we would have previously done, and repeated at 12 months, and we'll aim to move people into an aphasia cafe, and the one-to-one support will come to an end unless we can justify a need to continue that one-to-one support. If you as a volunteer are able to continue that, then we might be able to extend it to 12 months. Ideally though, what we want is for our volunteers to be in a position to take on a new client match once that initial client match comes to an end. So we're trying to rotate you as our valuable volunteer base to meet some of the need in some of these key areas where we've struggled. And we're hopeful that we can move people around. It's good for experience, I guess, to work with some different people. It also encourages the clients that you have been working with to be as independent as they possibly can be. So I think in some cases, not all, there's certainly more cases of benefit from people having longer term one-to-one support than not. But there are certainly some cases where it has become that people have depended on that support. And we're really keen to reduce that if we can, although it's a really valuable thing to provide that ongoing support to somebody and to almost become a friend. What we don't want is for somebody to not be able to manage without that support. So it means that we're able to keep in line with that waiting time, so people aren't hopefully waiting too long to be matched, and that we'll have a couple of windows through the year to be able to match people up. So I know for some people, apologies, I'm just having a quick drink there. I know for some people that's different to maybe what their current volunteer role looks like. And I know certainly a few people that I've spoken to about their individual clients have raised a little bit of a concern around how to step back when it's been quite a long time. And I can totally appreciate that people become, almost befrienders, and you make good friendships with people that you're working with, particularly over a longer period of time. And it can be hard to step away. And we certainly wouldn't say to anybody that they cannot meet with that person ever again. If they feel it's the right thing for them to continue to meet with that client in a friendship capacity, then absolutely we've no desire to discourage that. But the formal support agreement will need to be time limited now. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit around some of the changes that we've had to make. I think probably we are ultimately aiming for people to be matched with one, volunteers to be matched with one client, knowing that we want that consistency of those weekly sessions. If you can offer more than support to more than one, then brilliant. Obviously anything's a bonus, but the priority is more around making sure that we're offering that good amount of support and that we're offering that commitment to somebody for up to 6 months' time. Now, I fully appreciate that sometimes circumstances change beyond our control, but ultimately it's about trying to offer that commitment if you're able to. Okay, let me just stop sharing my screen. So those are the changes that we're looking to put into place. I'll stop the recording, then if anybody has any questions, they maybe feel a bit more comfortable to ask those now.